In 1988, the American biochemist and oncologist Van Rensselaer Potter, who had coined the term bioethics in his 1970 paper Bioethics: The Science of Survival and his 1971 book Bioethics: Bridge to the Future, published a book titled Global Bioethics. Potter used the term bioethics to designate an emerging discipline that could bring together life sciences and ethics, and scientific and technical facts and values. For Potter, this new field represented a bridge to the future of humanity. With the term global bioethics, he sought to encompass not only all fields of knowledge, but all human and environmental spaces. In other words, global bioethics should encompass not only clinical bioethics, but also ecological bioethics. However, 50 years later, the global bioethic theorized by Potter has largely been reduced to its North American aspect, centered on clinical ethics. In the midst of an unprecedented health, economic, and social crisis brought about by a coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, it is worth remembering that the role of bioethics in what is probably the most important debate for the continuation of human life on the planet, the environmental debate, has been minimal. In view of the dangers that threaten life as we know it today, and thus human continuity on the planet itself, it is imperative to ask ourselves, what kind of change is needed to avoid such risks, how to achieve it, and what the role of bioethics should be in this transition. In 2019, a study published by the IPBES warned that human society was threatened by the degradation of the natural network that supports life on Earth. 1 year later, after the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, scientists from the same agency stated that human activities such as aggressive deforestation, intensive agriculture and farming, mining, overdeveloped infrastructures, and the exploitation of wild animals had created the perfect storm for the emergence of pandemics, and that COVID-19 could be only the beginning. There are two apparent sides to the coronavirus crisis we are facing. On the one hand, at its origin, the environmental crisis. On the other hand, in its consequences, a public health crisis. In its turn, there are two sides to the public health crisis. The first has to do with the health education of the population, with habits and actions that precede that crisis. Curing patients is not the sole purpose of medicine. Furthermore, it is not even its main purpose. Rather, that purpose is prevention. Prevention should be both private, as in private hygiene and health education, and public, as in public hygiene and health policies. Both are essential. However, since the end of the 18th century, our society has disproportionately focused attention on the latter to the detriment of the former. The second side of the crisis is linked to the state of emergency associated with the current pandemic. From this point of view, the need to make decisions quickly and in uncertain circumstances generates conflict and can limit or even damage certain values or individuals and society in general. However, as we have previously stated, the coronavirus crisis we are facing combines two aspects. On the one hand, at its origins, the environmental crisis, and on the other hand, in its consequences, a public health crisis. We have just discussed the second aspect, its effects on public health. It is now time to examine its origins in a general sense, connecting bioethics with ecology and with the environment, as originally suggested by Potter. In June 2019, at the initiative of Daniel Callahan, the Hastings Center organized a meeting on the topic of bioethics and climate change that brought together scientists, policy analysts, bioethicists, and scholars from other areas of expertise. At this meeting, Callahan stated that both global warming mitigation and health improvements share some similar ethical problems and dilemmas. Of the multiple paths to address these problems, the easiest and therefore most seductive solution is a purely technological one, which obviates the cultural change necessary to obtain sustainable results. A more appropriate solution would be to find the balance between cultural change and the possibilities offered by technology. In medicine, this amounts to a balance between preventive medicine and state-of-the-art medicine. In the case of global warming, this balance should occur between the changes needed to reduce the effect on the environment, such as the use of fossil fuels, for example, and technological and economic solutions, such as solar panels and wind turbines. In this uncertain scenario, the recommendation of the bioethicists gathered at the Hastings Center was that bioethics needed to descend from its ivory tower and collaborate with environmental science and ecology to address the ethical issues of climate change. Mildred Solomon, the president of the center, explained that during the same event that too often our field identifies the bio in bioethics too narrowly. Too often bioethics has not really taken a deep look at the moral issues related to climate change. Some possible courses of action to address the problems that our society is facing include, according to Callahan, a change in vision for both individuals and society. Since it is unlikely that the values of progress, interpreted as synonymous of wealth, and capitalism will be abandoned in the future, Callahan believed that an alliance between legislation, social movements, and the business sector is necessary to make this change in vision possible. Moreover, Callahan's view was that the only effective solution is to address the problems of today's world from a global perspective. Diego Gracia has also been very vocal in this respect. Like Callahan, he believes that the big problems are not only not being solved, but are becoming increasingly massive, such as, for example, the problem of migration, but also the issue of the rising levels of economic inequality, chronic unemployment, climate change, and so on. However, Gracia stated that if politicians are to be able to manage these important problems, we must begin by educating society so that it makes its political choices based on global values and not only on individual interests. He argued, therefore, that a change, of course, is necessary, but this time not only on a large scale, at the political or institutional level, but above all on a small scale and starting with each and every one of us. What can the contribution of bioethics be in addressing all these issues? Mainly, it can contribute to clarify the debate and help with making right decisions. At this point, it is always worth remembering the importance of facts, because any attempt to construct purely abstract theories or to isolate the bioethicist in an ivory tower is bound to fail. Bioethics can play an important role in the debate by helping citizens to understand and identify the values that are at risk and to visualize the changes that need to take place at both the individual level and at the level of society, starting with educational change. At the same time, bioethics can help to clarify and present both to the public and the policymakers the global consequences of this crisis on public health. Furthermore, once the answers move from the debate or theoretical phase to a practical phase, with significant consequences for citizens, bioethics can provide the tools to help governments, organizations, and individuals make decisions that take into account all the values involved. In conclusion, perhaps the pandemic we are experiencing will awaken us from our Western dream, which has regarded nature as its own property, technological advances as the only indicator of progress, and individual wealth as the prevailing social value. Within the broader context of the environmental crisis, the coronavirus crisis we are facing, and the problems of public health ethics that this crisis entails, constitute incontrovertible proof that our way of life needs a change of course. Contrary to widespread opinion, this change cannot be purely technological, but rather must be accompanied by an educational and cultural change. In short, it is necessary to reclaim Potter's visionary idea of broadening the field of bioethics, which has been largely reduced to clinical bioethics in its American version, so that biological facts that once seemed to be of secondary importance should at present come to the forefront, due to their unquestionable impact on the delicate balance of all forms of life, and consequently also on all forms of human life. Thank you for your attention.